everyone. Welcome to the Business Talk podcast. I am your host Deepak. Today we have the privilege of hosting Professor Ashish Sinha, a distinguished professor of marketing at the University of Queensland Business School, Australia. Professor Sinha is also the visiting professor of marketing and research fellow at the Indian School of Business, Hyderabad. In this episode, Professor Sinha will explore intriguing and highly relevant research topic, competing in the age of AI disruption. Professor Sinha, it's a pleasure to welcome you to this podcast episode. We are honored to have you join us today.
Thank you very much, Deepak, for having me, and I look forward to our conversation as well.
Thank you, sir. Professor Sinha, can you briefly explain what AI disruption means and how it's impacting various industries today?
Sure. So there are different ways to think about this whole concept of a disruption. And the way that I look at it is that there is a state of equilibrium. And in the state of equilibrium, there are all these different players that have a role to play. And also there are winners and losers. So some actors or some players are winning and some players are losing, but there's some sort of an equilibrium. And with any sort of disruption, and usually one potential way of sort of say disequilibrium being created is through technology. And artificial intelligence happens to be a new technology. It's a revolutionary technology, in my opinion, a technology that we have never witnessed before. And so now it is disrupting the existing equilibrium. And the outcome of that could potentially be so it's creating a disequilibrium as a result of it, that the new equilibrium could be such that the winners and losers are very different from what the winners and losers were before. So, particularly when it comes to the advanced economies and the emerging economies, many of the emerging economies, and one of them, but obviously, is India. I guess to me, India has already emerged, but is going to gain a lot from this in comparison to many of the advanced countries. So, it's for the first time. It's the fourth industrial revolution. It's a big disruption, and that disruption is such that the advanced economies, maybe some of them, but not all of them, are going to be the winners. While a lot of countries, or a few countries, like for instance, as an example, India, will gain a lot from it because of a whole host of reasons: the digital infrastructure, exceptionally young and skilled workforce, and so on and so forth. So it's a very exciting time, and all sectors of the economy. I can't even think of any industry, any sector that is not currently being impacted in some form, some more and some less. But it really doesn't matter what sector economy it is, it's being. So whichever industry, whether we think about FMCG, transportation, government, public, you could just, pharmaceuticals. So it can be any, and there are a lot of these case studies where it show that there's an impact of that. And but obviously, as a result of that, some companies are winning. They were not the winners before, but now they're winning, while the winners are actually now losing. So, so those things are happening a lot right across all sectors of the economy.
Thank you, Professor. How is AI reshaping marketing strategies and brand management? Can you share some examples of companies successfully leveraging AI in their business effort?
So again, marketing and marketing strategy and branding strategies are being hugely impacted by AI. And that's a reflection of, just as what I talked about before, that all sectors of the economy is being impacted. And again, some companies are leveraging it a lot better than others, right? Simple examples, Nike, how it mines the data, because what AI can help you do is one, there's enormous amounts of data, various different types of data, unstructured, structured. So unstructured would be in the form of text and images. Structured would be the usual numeric data, lots and lots of data, and which allows companies, for instance, the example that I was just providing you with, Nike, to really mine that data to provide highly personalized experiences and allows the, customers to create very personalized products, right? Whatever the shape, size, the texture, the material, all those sort of things, different options. But that's only one part of it. It is what is so important about AI at this point in generative AI and conversational AI, which is a part of generative AI, right, is that the way that people, customers, consumers, people, individuals can interact with this AI is pretty much like human-like. And that is not something that we have experienced before. So that's the other angle that you see is that changing, whether it is to do with how service is being delivered. Nike, I just provided you with one example of that. You could say the insights that are provided by that. Adidas is also using it for micro-segmentation. Uber, for instance, for its pricing decisions, right price, right, and how much it pays to the drivers and bringing everyone together. There's large amounts of data. So the whole pricing algorithm is based on that. So there's so much of stuff that is happening, right? I'm just providing you some bits and examples of it, that some of these businesses, like Nike, is leveraging it, but some of these businesses wouldn't have existed. And Uber being an example, Airbnb being an example of it, had it not been for data and AI. So it is much bigger than just the marketing part of it. The very existence is because of data and AI.
What are the biggest challenges businesses face when they're trying to adapt AI-driven challenges? And how can they overcome these hurdles?
Sure. So I think, it's a really great question. And this is where a lot of companies are failing. Many of the companies are at this point wearing the toes, and particularly since the advent of Gen AI or ChatGPT, which really is an interface. So that means that technology had existed. Going back to the first question about disruption, right? Disruption at the end of the day is about democratization of consumption, how it makes things accessible, affordable, right? And so when you think about ChatGPT, that was a big disruption, not because of the technology. The technology had existed forever, right? It was to do with that it made Gen AI accessible and affordable to all of us, democratization of that. So that's the disruption part of it. Now, the challenge that we face was that if you look at what is often termed as the AI stack. So if you visualize a stack, right? And so at the bottom, so there are different layers. At the bottom is the hardware. So which is where you've got NVIDIA's, AMD's, Intel's of the world. And that's to do with the foundation, pretty much like the foundation of a house. On top of that are the cloud providers. And with that, LLM providers. So cloud providers are the Googles, the Microsofts, and LLMs, they are providing LLMs services as well. Now, the money, and then on top of that is how do you use these to develop end user applications? So that's one layer. And then the topmost layer is the end user applications. Now, so the excitement around artificial intelligence and Gen AI was that because you've got the cloud layer and the hardware layer already existing, it should be very easy for us to develop end user applications, which could be then embedded in whether it is conversational AI, whether it is Nike that is using it, whether it is Uber, that doesn't really matter, right? The amount of time that it's going to take for developing any end user is going to be a 10th or maybe 100th of what it takes now. And that was the real excitement, right? Because you've got all the building blocks, a Lego house. Think of it as a Lego house. You've got all the building blocks in place. All you have to do is to use this bit and that bit, and there would be a new application, an end user application that would emerge from it. Unfortunately, that's not happening. So what is happening is that the folks at the hardware folks, as you know, the value of NVIDIA has gone up so much. Then on top of that, cloud, Google, Microsoft, whoever, right? Meta, all of them are making massive amounts of money, but the end user applications that are successful have been very few and far between. So this is what is often termed as the 1 trillion, 1.4 trillion problem that we currently have with artificial intelligence, that we really haven't worked out how do we create value, and then how do we appropriate value from that, right, from artificial intelligence. So any company that is starting on this particular journey has to first understand what is this technology that we are dealing with, right? Now, when I say this AI stack, so I'm not the one who came up with it. All the VCs use it because, if you're at the bottom, then your investments have to be in billions of dollars. As an example, you look at in Uttar Pradesh, 40,000 crores is going to be invested in semiconductors. So that is close to, $6 to $7 billion US or $8 billion Australian. So it's a large amount of investment, and this is just the starting point. There'll be massive amounts of investment that is so, countries like India and China and whatnot, they are now beginning to look at this space because it takes a lot of money. Same as with cloud. I mean, we've got a few cloud providers, and if you look at the market share, they sort of dominate. So the VCs look at this and say, how much money do you require to be investing or existing at a particular layer? And if you're at the bottom, a lot of investment, a lot of competition, right? But as you start moving up, it's less and less investment that is required, but it is not working out. Again, a lot of these numbers are anecdotal in the sense that, VCs report these numbers. The economists, like a recent report by economists, was that $100 billion have been invested in those two top layers and $5 billion return. So we're so far away from profitability that it is in the interest of the companies at the bottom to say that a lot of great things is happening. But as soon as you start moving up, it doesn't work out that way. So, and so that's why we have to sort of start thinking about AI investment differently. We cannot think of it the way VCs, like Andrew Ng, he also thinks about AI investment the same way. Horowitz and Andreessen, they put out a paper exactly that. We have to start thinking about how do we create value? At the end of the day, how do we create value from the customer? And how do we then, how do we appropriate that value? How do you, revenue streams? And so that's the part that I think most companies today are completely and thoroughly struggling with, because it's for the first time, and I've had these conversations, a lot of people in practice and very senior folks, some of them who take our courses, our courses, and they'll tell you that this is the first time the board is pushing them. Usually you always go to the board and say, hey, I've got this wonderful plan and it's going to cost whatever, 10,000 crores. And they'll say, oh, go away. There's absolutely no way. These days, it's the board that's saying, we've got 10,000 crores, but we want you to work in AI and we want a plan like yesterday, right? And so it has changed. The whole landscape's changed a lot. But where we are failing is because we still have the same AI stack kind of a mindset that because if you will build, which is what the company does, then they'll come. And unfortunately, they are not coming. So the focus has to be much more on, how do you create value? What does that mean? And then once you have created value, do you have the ability to deliver it in places that your customers would want? And then finally, hey, how do we then make money from it?
Very, very interesting, Professor Sinha. Thank you. I glad that you shared this perspective. In what ways is AI altering consumer behavior and expectations? How should companies adjust their marketing strategies in response to AI?
Sure. One of them is that a lot of us are now expecting very personalized experiences, right? So it is no longer like one size fits all. That kind of experience is not something that people desire and or they are willing to even accept it, right? So they're not going to be accepting it. Given that that companies have very large amounts of data, and so they know how Deepak behaves differently from Ashish, so my experiences are going to be very different from that. So that is one expectation that a lot of customers have, right? But equally importantly, most customers are worried about privacy and what it means. Because if a company can go down to a Deepak level and an Ashish level, but obviously they have data from us that is pretty sensitive, right? I mean, a simple experiment is, and sometimes I've done that, like I click on YouTube, I click on a video by mistake, and for the next whatever 15, 20 minutes, every ad or every video that pops up is related to that one, right? So it seems, and you have to clear those things off before it starts doing it all over again, right? And so it seems like, and there are, there's listening, there's a lot of hearing, listening, um, sort of things that you do that you wouldn't want anyone to know. They have now ears and eyes everywhere, on the phone. So I think, that is the other part, the ethics of it. That is also an expectation now. And so it's a balance. It's a very fine balance between the two of privacy as well as personalized experiences. The third one is, well, we want to trust. We want to have trust in these, artificial intelligence systems, that they are doing the right thing by the customer rather than by the company. And how do you build that? Like a very simple example of that would be, surge pricing by Uber. And a lot of people think that it's an absolute ripoff because just because you are in a position of vulnerability and the company has that information, highly personalized information, it can jack up the price, right? And there were instances, so I'm not making this up, like Sydney Siege, right, in downtown Sydney, where the prices went up by 50 to 100 times because everyone was trying to leave the city because there was a situation unfolding. And so when something like that happens, there is a loss of, because if you don't have the guardrails to say, hey, AI system, this is wrong, right? You shouldn't be doing. Yes, you can make money, but you can make money once, because that time everyone, if someone is in a vulnerable situation or a position, but obviously they'll respond accordingly, but then they will never forget, right? So it's a very dynamic process. And if you look at it just as a cross section at one point in time, right, rather than a longitudinal kind of how it changes, the expectation changes over time or what they are. At one given point in time, you might say, oh yeah, I would trust the system a lot because it's doing all the data and using. And so if Deepak or Ashish have a bias, it could potentially be less. But another one would be that as your experiences over time, you sort of understand some of the ways that it is, for a lack of a better word, manipulating, right? And taking advantage of some of your vulnerabilities. And companies have to be very careful of that. So this is a whole thing about balance between innovation and privacy, balance between personalized experiences and privacy and ethics. And where do we stand? Because if you go too far out in the sense that, if your concern is that, hey, privacy and ethics are very important, which then has an adverse impact on innovation, right? I mean, look at Europe as a prime example with GDPR, that innovation is stagnating, even though privacy and ethics, they'll score very high on that, right? So it's sort of a balance between these two. And I'm not sure that any company or regulatory body, right? We are not even looking at a company, has really worked that out. But that would be something that all companies have to be very careful of, So it's a fine line between the two and how you walk that.
Good one. Professor, we talk about marketing side and the business side of the AI. Now my next question is about the business operations. So how can companies gain a competitive advantage by integrating AI into their regular operations? And, are there any specific strategies you would like to recommend?
Sure. It's, again, a fantastic question, right? And it's a fantastic question because, it's the productivity gains where a lot of focus has been on AI, right? I mean, everyone talks about how it'll improve lives of people because, we can do stuff that took us so long. It's going to take us a lot less time than what we did before. So, and this is how the economists also look at this space, right? So it's like my work as a professor. And what do I do every day, right? If I teach, do research, and then it's be like, okay, let's take Gen AI or artificial intelligence. What can it do of all the different things, right, that I need to do? What are some of the things that AI can do? And then you say, oh, it seems like it's like a 60% overlap or 80% overlap. Now, if it's in 100% overlap, but obviously your job's online, pretty much you can be replaced. So there's one way to think about AI and how AI could increase productivity, and then increase competitive advantage. Strangely enough, a lot of work that's been done in that area kind of shows that there should be a lot of places where AI can replace human effort. And so therefore, the productivity gain should be substantial. But what the data shows is that the productivity gains are not as high as most people had expected to be. And the growth, because, whenever there's an industrial revolution, like disruption, whatever you want to call it, this is the fourth industrial revolution, the productivity gains are not as high as what has been expected. So, but that's one way of looking at how to build competitive advantage. The way that we think about it, or I think about it, is very different, right? And it is that there are three core processes of any company. Now, this is work that Professor Srivastava had started a long time back, so I'm kind of picking up on that. When I say Professor Srivastava, I'm Professor Rajendra Srivastava, and I work very closely with him. I'm published and part of that. So there are three core processes of any business. One is supply chain. The second one is innovation. And the third one is customer facing, right? Now, think about so this is on the side of productivity gains or efficiency. So how can you make supply chain better by the use of AI data? how can you make innovation better by the use of AI data? How can you make customer facing better by the use of AI and data, right? And there are a number of different ways by which we can do that. So, for instance, transparency. A lot of companies, without naming names, some of them that we've consulted for, some of the largest firms in India, and which ones they would be. Some starts with A, others start with R, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Large firms, and that is largely so the use of data and AI is to make these processes more efficient. So rather than looking at what Ashish does or what Deepak does or what Kiran does, it is, let's look at these core processes and how do these core processes be impacted such that you are more efficient than your competitor. And as a country, we are more efficient than another country, right? India is more efficient than China or whichever country, or United States or Australia, or whatever, whichever country it might be, right? So that's on the side of efficiency, but that's not where this building of competitive advantage leveraging AI stops. On the other side is, going back to my example about ChatGPT, how can these three combine to then make things more affordable, accessible, right? Democratize consumption. People who didn't have access to these products can now have access to these products because of the efficiency gains that we've got. So not only on this side, it's the efficiency gains by which we are building competitive advantage, but now we're able to then grow the market because we are able to target segments, international or domestic, which we were not able to do before. So it goes back to, the whole point about the end user layers. And rather than just looking at the investment, if you were to look at it like this way, that how does the efficiency increases, which then allows us to target new segments and markets, which means we're not only growing like exponential growth, which is what, as you know, most companies, many of your firms, I'm sure, but we're also decreasing cost at the same time, which then has massive impact on the profitability, EBITDAs, and so on and so forth, right? So that's what I think we have to start thinking about competitive advantage, not through the lens of, as I would say, how the economists look at it, but business processes and business strategy, or the value creation and the value appropriation. That I think will be how organizations look at. And if they do, then they would see the gains from it.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Sinha. My next question is about the responsibility. What ethical considerations should businesses keep in mind when they implement AI technologies, and how can they ensure responsible use of AI?
So some of the things I think I've touched base upon before as well. So I can mention it again, but I think, there is a huge responsibility on the part of the company, because when they have access to data, sensitive data, the storage of that data, the communication using that data, transferring, analysis, right? So all of that. So that's on the cybersecurity side of things. There is an expectation that now any sort of data leaks, that's just not acceptable by end customers, whether it's the company's mistake, whether it was a hackers, ransomware, whatever that might be, right? So that's one part of it. The second one is, at the end of the day, AI is nothing more than models, right? Regardless of what we might say, they are way better models than we ever built before. So that means there is a chance that it may not provide you with the correct response, which is what hallucination essentially is, right? We keep talking about hallucination. But really what hallucinations is that it's predicted something that is wrong, because regardless of what model you might have, at the end of the day, there's always a likelihood that it's going to give you the wrong result. And if that wrong result can impact the life of an individual, so say, for instance, if it's a farmer and the farmer's future and livelihood is dependent on their ability to get a loan, and the model, for whatever reason, predicts that this farmer should get and this farmer should not get, but then the person who's not getting, the prediction is incorrect, there are consequences to that. And so it just then what do we do, right? It's a conundrum. It's like, okay, we want to automate everything. We want to make it as efficient, like some of the things that we were talking about before, whether it's the supply chain, innovation, but at the same time, we have this huge responsibility. And this, apart from, the biases, because the training data is such that it has the biases. But in some ways, to me, when people talk about training data bias, it's like, it's for the first time we can see what those biases are. They have always existed. That's why they're in the training data. If we have hired our HR practices as such that we have preferred whoever one type of people over another, then that becomes quite evident to me. So we need to do, so it's not bad data, it's the bad decisions that we've been making, the humans have been making, that becomes for the first time apparent when we use an AI algorithm. So, and then we need, guardrails around that, like once we have realized that this. So so those are some of the big ethical considerations that we have, because we are it's like Minority Report's movie. I don't know whether you've watched it or not. It was before, and these people could predict that someone's going to commit a crime, and they would go and, apprehend them, right? So they get arrested even before. And in some ways, that's what we're doing now. We're playing God. We're saying that because we have enough data, we can predict how people will behave, how Ashish is going to behave. Therefore, if let's suppose, it's whatever that might be, that, there are interventions, but maybe the model has not been able to predict properly. And if that is the case and has huge consequences for me and my future, right, then it becomes a big ethical issue, and how we manage that and how responsibly we have to use data and all that becomes even much more critical and important than ever before. So yeah, some things to think about. I don't know whether I have the solution for it, but certainly some things that any company has to think about whenever they say responsible AI.
What future trends in AI do you foresee impacting the marketing landscape? And how should businesses prepare for these changes?
Again, I guess, last 30, 40 minutes, we've been talking about all the changes that are happening. To me, I believe that there's no doubt that there's hype, but that's always there. But that doesn't mean that this is going away. This is here to stay. The speed at which things are going to change, rapid change, it's going to be a lot faster than before. So, and what it then means is that the companies, they need to build capacity and capability in this space. If for whatever reason at this point, they've been keeping away from it because they think like it's a fad and digital is a fad and we've been doing this for the last 50 years. We know this stuff and we know this business really well. Well, no, right? So, and this is an advice that I provide because a lot of people ask me about this. Well, my job's not going to be there. Companies might go bust. What should we do? So, well, learn and learn fast. Learn as quickly as you can, because this is coming. And not this is coming. This is here. You know, it is here. It's just that it's going to take some time. And how long that will be, my prediction is it'll happen a lot sooner than what most people think it to be. And it's going to have an impact, as I mentioned right from the beginning, all sectors of the economy, right? So because you can think of that any and every sector, you've got those three core processes. And if they are being impacted, then regardless of which, it'll impact each sector differently, but it will impact those three core processes.
Yeah. Professor Sinha, last question.
Sure.
What advice would you give to managers, who are concerned about the rapid pace of AI advancement and its implications of their roles?
Going back to what I said before, I mean, it's the same thing, right? Learn fast as quickly as you can, because this is here, right? This revolution is happening as we speak. And you cannot be an ostrich, that if I bury my head, then this thing will blow over. It's not going to blow over. It's going to impact you. It's going to impact your company. So the best way to do these things would be to be prepared for it. And to be prepared means, learn how a company build that capability within your organization, whether it's your employees. It's the time for all of us to be students again, at least, because these things are changing so rapidly. The pace at which change is happening is going to increase. That means whatever we're doing now, we might, instead of LLM, we might have TLMs or SLMs or whatever, right? I mean, we don't even know. But so that is going to be the other part as well, that we'll have to be students for all our lives now. So it's just the whole concept of, that you finish your education and you don't have to do anything. Now we start working. But we'll have to be learners, lifelong learners. And that is one, and as a company as well, building culture, organization, because at the end of the day, and probably that's one thing that I didn't mention, that organization. So this is about transformation. This is about, what was the old to the new. That means there's a lot of change that is happening. Change brings a lot about uncertainty. And so the focus on well-being and mindfulness and all those things would also become very critical and important. It'll be something that your employees will expect from a company, because this rapid change, as you just mentioned, right, brings about a lot of uncertainty. We don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. So mental well-being, I think, is of the employees and of all of us, as is going to become even more critical now than ever before. Not that it was not important before.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Sinha, for joining us as a guest on today's podcast episode and for dedicating your time to discussing one of the most trending topics of our technological era. I look forward to reconnecting with you by end of the year to gain further insight on this topic. Once again, thank you and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thanks a lot, Deepak, for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation with you, and I hope that this was interesting and insightful
Thank you,
as well.
sir.
Thanks a lot.